I'm a producer, music composer, more recently film composer and spoken word artist. I have grown up with sort of immersed in a lot of different styles of music, but about 10 years ago actually started making music. And then through some good fortune met some great other artists and musicians who helped kind of inspire and bring that vision to life. I tend to think of my work as storytelling, or almost a cinematic narrative. So even if there is no film involved, it's still a journey from point A to point B. And music is music. Like I'll draw on anything that sort of inspires me and I find interesting. Indian classical, although I don't have any formal training of any sort in there, I've just had a lot of exposure over the last 10 years. Happen to have met, some of the great, ustads of our time in terms of Indian classical music, but a lot of young artists as well. So that aesthetic, that understanding of tal and rag very much does play into my work. So that's played a role. I played in concert bands when I was in junior high. So I played jazz tuba, tenor saxophone, soprano saxophone. So jazz works its way in. Listened to a lot of rock, a lot of hip hop, R&B. So basically, if I was listening to it growing up, somehow, some way, it kind of works in. So there's definitely a very strong South Asian aesthetic to my music, but it's bringing those South Asian traditional elements together with electronica and just different styles in a narrative that makes sense. So I just finished up the soundtrack release for Surkhab, which is my second feature film. It's done really well on the festival circuit. It's been about 6 or 7 different festivals. They just played at the London International Film Festival and won a bunch of awards. And I believe the next stop is Bombay. After that, they'll actually go to theatrical release. A lot of people ask, what is Surkhab? Surkhab is actually a type of migratory duck that goes between India and, if I'm not mistaken, actually migrates between Europe and sort of South Asia. And it's a saying in Punjabi that, Surkhab de par lag gaye ne. Somebody's got all these high hopes, these high dreams, and all of a sudden, they feel like taking off. So the film came my way through some good fortune, and I got to spend time with the director initially and the film's producers, and it's just a very, very cinematic journey of this character as she migrates through some tricky circumstances from India to Canada, and I feel really proud of the score. I mean, I really tried to make this a different feeling piece of music or work of music to set the context of the film, but also the music happened to stand alone, which is why I'm very proud of the soundtrack. Canada as a whole is a pretty incredible place. I grew up out west in Edmonton, which is definitely a smaller city, definitely somewhat more isolated in a sense than just that it's further north of the U.S. border. But it's still, it was an incredible hub for music. I mean, that's really where I cut my teeth and got exposed to a lot of different styles. With one of my good friends, we used to spend a lot of time in the classical music scene, ended up spending a fair bit of time with, Ustad Zakir Hussain. Got to meet Ustad Sultan Khan Saab, so some of the most established artists right down to some, up-and-coming Indian classical artists. And then people from all styles. Like, we'd just literally get together and hang out and jam in basements and studios and put together new ideas. So it was a great place to create. Toronto is like that, but so much more in that there's just more people here. And so you'll find artists from any different style here. And for the most part, people are really willing to experiment and try new things. And for me, who, I in many ways, I've got a scene or a narrative in mind, but I need a number of people to kind of bring that narrative to life. Those people are all here for the most part. And that's a really, really incredible experience. My first album was in 2007 called Amnesia. And this one's a progression of it. So I've come a long ways as an artist, but, also a lot of things have happened in my life around the world. And it's all sort of me telling that story. So there's pieces, kind of based on the rise of a new indie Indian conscience. We were in India in 2009 and we're going again, later this year. And there's such a hunger amongst the average person for change there, for something better for the country. I've got pieces about that. Then I've got another piece that really came about when I found out we were having a little girl. It's kind of inspired by my own daughter, who's now 2.5. And it's a very delicate piece, about butterflies, basically. And she runs around the house, and it's basically when I see her, the sounds that play in my head. So it's personal. It's sort of global. It's very intimate. It's all of those different things. My goal is to absolutely get this out in 2014. If there's one and only one thing I hope people do when they listen to my music is just think a little differently. Challenging yourself to think a little bit differently. And I mean that by when we put different sounds together, sometimes people will say, hey, you can't put a Ukrainian dulcimer with a bagpipe and a tabla. That doesn't make any sense. Well, the background on me, like Omnesia, really comes from Om and Amnesia being put together. All sounds came from the same source. That's that concept of Nada Brahma, which is, it's God in the form of sound. If all sounds came from the same source, then they all have the same root. I'm trying to find through my music, putting those different styles together, that common thread between them. So when people listen to it and they say, hey, I never thought those two things would work together, but they do. Part of that is the sonic experience, but part of it's the ideas. And for me, particularly in spoken word, it's when you start kind of preaching and talking about certain ideologies to people, it's easy for them to tune out. But when it's put in terms of music, as a piece of poetry, people tend to be a little bit more receptive. And my goal isn't to necessarily change people's minds. It's just to get people to think a little bit more. And I've been inspired by certain artists and people in history who have been able to do that successfully. I just hope in some small way I can do that. Just a big shout out and thank you to Maestri and the entire team at DesiYUP. You guys are doing some incredible work. There's a lot of great artists out there, and there's a lot of people interested in new music. And we're lucky and fortunate that someone like you is actually going out there and starting to expose people to this music and to the work that we do. So thank you.